This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Economics. Everyone has questions about their farm. From general inquiries to in-depth fertilizer questions, find straightforward answers at nutrien-economics.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
All right, yes, welcome here. It is RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147. My name is Lyndsey Smith. Tuesday is my show. It is Tuesdays with Lyndsey here on October 10th. So welcome here. So glad you could join. How was your Thanksgiving? And I know I'm speaking to the Canadians, my fellow Canadians. Thanksgiving weekend, it's in October. I know it's weird for our American friends, but we had a wonderful time. The weather definitely turned cold and rainy, but we managed to get together with family and spend some time together. And certainly today feeling very much, especially as the world sort of went to hell in a handbasket over the weekend, feeling very much grateful for everything that we have, including wonderful conversations in this amazing industry. And that's what today's show is all about. So on today's show, you're going to hear from Heather Watson with Farm Management Canada about a new study that just came out about the role of women in farming. You're also going to hear from Mike Relf about the Ontario Predation Program for livestock. We've also got a clip from Talking Tile with Peter Johnson and Matt Williams about tile drainage. And then at the end of the show, I've just got a few conversations I wanted to pick up on and share with you as well. So as always, if you've got any feedback on the show, you can call that RealAg listener line 1-855-776-6147. You can find me, of course, across social media at RealLoudLyndsey, or zip us an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. All right, we're going to take a quick break and I'll be back with Heather Watson right after this.
Proven Seed is at home in your soil. With the widest seed portfolio in Western Canada, our seed is developed and tested on and for your local acres. Our hybrids and varieties are tested by hundreds of growers, so we know how our seed will perform in your local conditions. Better returns start with seed that belongs where it's planted, and this seed belongs here. Secure your seed today at your local Nutrien Ag Solutions or visit provenseed.ca to learn more.
It's now time for a product spotlight, and today we're talking to Vantage Ag, and we're joined right now by the president of Vantage Ag. It is Paul Sinkovich. So what makes your new liquid fertilizers so unique for both Canada and the U.S.?
When our liquid fertilizers are reacted, we add a process that makes the particle size of that nutrient 1/3 to 2/3 of a nanometer. These tiny, tiny particles are only 30 to 40 times bigger than an atom. What we find when these nutrients are sprayed on a plant, any plant, these tiny bioavailable particles are quickly absorbed by the plant and within a couple of days are throughout the entire plant and being metabolized and used by the plant. Crop safety is impeccable, and with this new technology, we can now feed plants what they need through foliar feeding more than we ever thought possible.
We've been talking to Paul Sinkovich. He is president of Vantage Ag, and the product is Reacted Quantum Ag Technology. Paul, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Sean.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Alliance Seed and CDC Endure Oats. Top yields, excellent disease resistance, and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure is available through Alliance Seed authorized retailers. Joining me now on the line is Heather Watson. She's the Executive Director of Farm Management Canada. Welcome here, Heather.
Thanks, Lyndsey. Great to be here.
All right. So, exciting week. I know when this particular report we're going to talk about today landed in my inbox, I'll be honest, I'd kind of forgotten about it. I knew it was sort of happening. And then Shazam, there it was. And I was like, oh goodness, I need to talk to Heather about this. So what report was published this week? Tell me all about it.
Yeah, so we're really excited by the release finally of a research project that has been underway for the past 2 years. In short form, it's understanding the experience of farm women. And so it's a national study that we commissioned. We started with an environmental scan to kind of make sure that we knew what was out there and any gaps that we might be able to fill through our study, and then through a national survey and interviews. Wanted to kind of replace what we had found to be, some stereotypes and anecdotes with a foundation of facts. So, we had known from our experience and our research that women are crucial to farm success, always have been, always will be, but are, continuously frustrated that the industry hasn't evolved to be more welcoming and supportive. And, oftentimes their contributions are unrecognized, undervalued, etc. And in our world, which is farm business management, oftentimes women struggle to get other members of the farm team on board, especially when it comes to things like planning ahead, communications, and being proactive. And so we kind of wanted to see if we could get to the bottom of this.
So walk me through the scope of this. So it is a pretty in-depth study, a pretty wide swath here. Pardon the pun. Actually, it's totally intended, so go for it. But I mean, give me the scope of this here, because it's pretty in-depth.
Yeah, scope is pretty huge. I feel like we asked every question that we could possibly ask, but of course there's so much more that we can do from here. But in terms of scope, I mean, it is across Canada. We, worked with a research firm to, it's interesting because, so we did kind of two things, and this is a little bit more on the academic side. So sorry if it's boring some folks, but, we advertise through social media and comms and other platforms and stuff to get women, interested in participating in this study. But we thought, that might bring out women who were already interested in these things and already on those platforms. So we also used kind of a random sample, to kind of be able to compare and contrast, those women that maybe aren't highly involved in women in ag activities or in social media and things like that, to kind of see, is there a significant difference between those respondents? And it was kind of cool that there was, and like we got over 1,000 respondents from across Canada, all farm women of various, backgrounds and size of operation and kind of operation. So the breadth and scope we're really, really proud of, crossing, English and French language as well. And it's really interesting because I know you haven't really asked about the findings yet, but one of the interesting findings is we thought there would be more, the results would be more delineated by, demographics or farmographics. So how did you come to the farm? What kind of farm do you have? And that's not at all what we found out. So it was really interesting that, we have this breadth and scope of the respondents and huge diversity, which is amazing, but it definitely doesn't mean that there's kind of a one size fits all solution.
So fascinating though, and I don't think it's boring at all, Heather. So anyone who does, you can just anyway. But I think it's important that you explain these things. That when you did this scan and asked these questions and did this survey, that part of the design was to try and get out there and make sure that you're capturing people with in different life stages, different backgrounds, different paths to farming, different all those sorts of things. Now, what are some of the key questions, or at least topic areas that you would ask in this survey?
Yeah, so we asked like the typical, demographic questions around education, age, experience in farming, like you say, path to farming. And then we also asked about, farmographics, we would call them. So, what type of production, what size of production, what's your operating structure and things like that. And we also asked things about, marital status and things, because we just wanted to see what, are there possible correlations and causations between demographics, farmographics, and the experience of farm women. So yeah, a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm. Now, and so we are, of course, and even in this discussion today, only really introducing the fact that this report exists, a bit about what went into it, and we'll talk sort of high level findings. But at the end of this interview, please stick around. Heather will share where you can find it, and of course, you can find it at RealAgriculture.com. We'll link to it there as well. But I have not had a time to dig into all of it because it's quite a large report. But from the high level, where did you find some of course, we're looking at it from the sort of farm business lens, where did you find some of the biggest gaps?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it's funny because I would say that, perhaps the biggest gaps are the lack of information that should already be out there on this stuff. So, for example, one of the key findings is that women are making extraordinary contributions to farming in Canada with a high degree of involvement in virtually every aspect of the operation. So, as an example, we're out there doing workshops and conferences and stuff, and a lot of women come up to us and say, yeah, I'm responsible for, the financial management on the farm. We're like, okay, cool. Let's, run some programs for that. But now with the results of this study, we know that we can say definitively, 69% of farm women surveyed in Canada are responsible for the financial planning and analysis on the farm. And so having those kinds of, sink your teeth into insights allows us to say, yeah, this is a real thing. And what are we doing to support these women? And how are we, intentionally designing our programs or offerings? Or, we don't do policy, but in the way of government, how are policy being designed with this information in hand? And, how are we creating a space for women to be involved in the design and discovery of those pieces? So rather than the, if you build it, they will come, having a methodology where you say, you know what, we're gonna ask first and then figure out what it is we want to do, rather than saying, look at this, shiny new thing. I hope you like it. I hope it's what you want. But really, this gives us the opportunity to understand what it is that needs to happen and making, concerted steps towards that, us and hopefully everyone else who reads the report.
So building off of that, because I think, so in some ways that confirms something we sort of assumed or thought of, right? And that's one of the things I think is really neat about this is it is sort of, it's a report or it's a survey that actually, you were asking these questions to figure out if what we assume is correct and of course challenge some of those assumptions, of some of the things that maybe don't line up. Now, but I'm still astounded by that number in that, I wouldn't have thought it was that high. Did you dig in a bit further as to, so they handle the financial management. Are they making the financial decisions? Did you dig that far in?
Yeah. So there's definitely a little bit in there in terms of, their roles in decision making, their level of decision making, how decisions are made on the farm through consensus, et cetera, et cetera. And then the interesting thing is, we looked out there when we did our environmental scan and we said, surely there's some sort of matrix out there that's these are all the things that need to happen to make a farm successful or, to run a farming household, as it were. And there's nothing. I think we found something from the 70s, which, as you can imagine, was a little outdated, a little inappropriate, especially reading it as a woman. But so one of the interesting things is we listed out, here's the business management activities, here's the livestock activities, here's the crop activities, here's the marketing, et cetera, and kind of said, let us know, how much you're involved and what you're responsible for, et cetera. So all of that can be found in the report. And it's interesting because even on the financial side, we break out, financial, record keeping has a different response, and being responsible for HR and payroll and things like that. So anyone who knows me knows I'm pretty detail oriented, and that's why it's such a gigantic report. I think I might have driven our research partners crazy on that front, but I just think it's so important to understand all these little nuances, because I think the results reveal, like, you can't just, paint everything with the same brush and be like, oh, women equals this, they need this. It's, the results reveal that there's huge diversity, and that means that, there's not just a one solution.
So some of the things that I think perhaps are not surprising in that they were sort of affirmed in this is, of course, the large and very important role that women play in the farm business, and certainly on the financial side. What were some of the surprising findings for you?
So, surprising. So one of the things that's really interesting was, so we worked with a steering committee, and thank goodness for these ladies. So they were women representing the kind of women in ag and ag women groups across Canada. And they've formed our steering committee that kind of helped us stay on track and, kind of righted us when we were going in the wrong direction, perhaps. And so when we started out, we're like, okay, let's talk about challenges and barriers, to your aspirations, your motivations, your goals, to you succeeding as a farm woman. And we had this really interesting discussion about, how we need to really separate out challenges and barriers, because the response was, it's really difficult to think of an actual barrier that's going to stop us, because nothing stops us. And so I was like, okay, but we're talking about, if you were comparing yourself to a male counterpart, where you have to jump through hoops, perhaps, that they don't, like, that's what we're talking about. And so it was just a really interesting, insight to say, when we do this survey, we need to be very clear about the difference between challenges and barriers. And then lo and behold, the results showed that women are continuing to face significant challenges and barriers. So we thought, they're, willing to go above and beyond and around and about to get over these challenges, or to get over these barriers, but they're still significant challenges. So I think that was one thing. And then the two other things that come to mind in terms of surprising was, and this again came up at the steering committee conversation, was the willingness to describe oneself as a farmer. A lot of the women found it very difficult. And so our results show that, although what was it? Something like over 80% were, very or full-time involved in the farm operation, but just over half agree with the statement, I am a farmer. And then 23%, I know I'm giving like exact, so that's probably weird, but let's say, a quarter actually disagree with that statement. But meanwhile, they're totally involved in the farm operation. And so that was interesting in terms of looking for respondents to this survey. We had to be very careful with our wording. We couldn't say, women on the farm or women in farming. Like, we had to go with farm women because of that kind of difficulty in the self-identity. And one might look at that and say, oh, well, I'm not a farmer, so I shouldn't respond to the survey.
Right.
And so that was really interesting for us. And then part of the thinking behind that as well, like when we're looking at the results and the analysis is, well, is it because that they're really highly, like some are really highly involved in the business management side of farming, and maybe that's not what they consider farming,
right?
Which opens a whole other can of worms, which can whole conversation for another day.
That's like a whole course or a master's project, Heather. Let's be honest, because as soon as you said that, my immediate, and I'm biting my tongue here, but okay, so what makes a farmer?
Yeah.
Because that's the next question, right? Is that if we were to ask all of these women, if they had a male counterpart in their life, and maybe that's their dad, their uncle, their brother, a husband, a partner, I wonder how they would answer. And if we looked at the role differences, I wonder how that would change. So I really do wonder, do we measure our farmer status based on, driving equipment or feeding livestock? But none of that is possible without the business management part. Well,
and none of that's possible without the women too, because you look at the crop and the livestock responsibilities, and they're right up there in terms of super involved. The only area that came out as, I'm not as heavily involved in was things like machinery repair.
Right.
And so is that what it means to be a farmer? Right. Is it as simple as if you can fix your own machines, check that box?
We are running out of time, Heather. This is, but exactly that. And so this is where I got so excited when this report came across my desk. So, I highly recommend everyone, and this is just the introduction of this.
Yes.
Not at all the last conversation we're going to have on it. But that is, I guess, where I do want to wrap this up for at least today. What happens next? What do we do with this report?
Yeah. So like you say, this was kind of our, we threw a rock into the water now. Our first splash. We're going to continue, kind of peeling out some of those interesting findings and insights from the study and share those, of course, because it's, of course, we worked with Centric Engine on this study, but it's not just for us. So the report has over, I think it's like 30 recommendations under 6 different headings. And so as much as we'll continue to share insights and use them to improve our programs, we also want to encourage others to do the same, to kind of pick up and run with it. Because some of the recommendations are very specific for very specific audiences. For example, how are we integrating women in policy development, for example. And so there's some really interesting stuff when it comes to the environmental scan. If folks want to read even more, I love the environmental scan because it really gives a history of kind of farming women in Canada and how we have supported them and where we may have faltered. But that kind of, gives you a really interesting idea on what things were like and how they may be now and how we can improve. And so if we can get the information out there as much as we can into every kind of, crack and crevice from grassroots to government in hopes of affecting change, I think that would be awesome. Because we can't say enough about these results, and just again, it's replacing stereotypes with a foundation of facts that we can then launch from. So it's like this launch pad for, oh my gosh, there's so many places we can go from here. We could do a comparative, male only study. How interesting would that be to do a human centered study of the male farm or the man farmer and see if the results are any different?
We got to leave it there. But Heather Watson with Farm Management Canada, what is the website, Heather? Where can people go to find this report?
Yeah, so you can just head over to our main website, fmc-gac.com, and look under research and analysis, and you'll find everything you ever wanted to know.
There you go. Okay, Heather, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thanks so much, Lyndsey. Always a pleasure.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
Your Co-op Grow team are your local experts because we live here too. Our agronomic specialists stay up to date with the latest research and technology to help support your entire farm operation. Talk to our team for advice tailored to your farm's needs. We have recommendations to help you optimize your crop yield and quality while enhancing the health of your land. Co-op, we're all growing together. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday, October 10th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by DefendYourN.ca. Low-rate NBPT solutions claim to protect nitrogen, but no imitator product delivers like Anvol, nitrogen stabilizer, the next-gen urease inhibitor from Koch Agronomic Services. See how others stack up to the proven power of Anvol at DefendYourN.ca. All right, we go now to a conversation that my colleague Bern Tobin had with Peter Johnson and Matt Williams just a few weeks ago for the inaugural episode of Talking Tile. So this is just a short run video series that we're doing here in Ontario about tile drainage. And tile drainage is one of those things, drainage is one of those things that can be kind of controversial, especially in Western Canada. Depends on who's doing it, where the water's going, and how it's done. But of course, here in Ontario, tile drainage and systematic tile drainage is an incredible tool to managing water and managing drainage and productivity of soil. And so this series is looking into sort of explaining some of that and what it takes, of course, for contracting, some of the strategies for tile, and all those sorts of things. So this is the kickoff episode, and this is Bern Tobin with Peter Johnson and Matt Williams.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to Talking Tile, a new video series here on Real Agriculture. Over the months ahead, we're going to be talking to a host of guests who are going to tackle a range of drainage topics. From how farmers can maintain their drainage systems to how drainage impacts the environment, there's a lot of ground to cover. On this episode, we're joined by drainage contractor Matt Williams and agronomist Peter Johnson. They'll define drainage, how it works, and why it's so important for agriculture.
Morning, Matt. Nice plow. Wow. So, you're a drainage guy. What exactly is tile drainage?
So tile drainage is water management. Basically, it's dealing with the interesting ideas that Mother Nature has.
So, Mother Nature, here in Ontario, typically we have too much water. So when you say water management, we're trying to take the water away?
No, so we're just lowering the groundwater table so that the surface water has somewhere to go, creating a nice, healthy soil bed.
So we're taking away, or we're managing the water table to let the crop grow better roots? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, ultimately the first benefit is yield. Obviously, if it doesn't pay properly and pay well, then people aren't going to do it. But also, it can be better for the equipment. You use less fuel and less wear and tear on your equipment as well.
So we're trying to improve soil health as well as increase yields. And the other thing that you're really trying to do for farmers like me is keep us from getting stuck. Because, man, getting mired in the mud is just brutal, right?
Absolutely. And erosion is also a big part of it as well. By allowing that ground to act like a sponge, it gives the water somewhere to go before it turns into runoff water.
So managing the water table gives us the sponge so that when it rains, there's some dry soil there to absorb the water, hold the water, and not have it run off the surface and take all the topsoil with it through erosion.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the biggest benefits, especially now with the environmental impact that is on everybody's radar.
Okay, but wait a minute. So we're taking all this water away. Isn't that going to dry up the groundwater, dry up my well? Like that water's not there anymore.
Definitely not. So essentially our drainage system, we're aiming for between that 2 to 3.5 foot depth, depending on the soil type. So essentially we're just lowering the water table to that point, not below that. It's just taking it once it gets to there and then removing it.
So we're taking 2.5 to 3 feet and we're draining that so that we manage the water table, but the water always comes into the tile from the bottom, right?
Exactly. And the best part about that, I feel, is that that's clean groundwater coming up. So essentially that should be the clean groundwater you see coming out the outlet pipe, so that the water on top, which can include all your fertilizers and everything else for farming practice, can be absorbed through the soil. So the soil is essentially acting like a filter.
So we filter that water, and if it rains and my water table's at 5 feet, say, that rain is actually going to go past the tile, which is really amazing that it goes right past that plastic tile in the field and down to the 5 foot level, and until it fills that soil surface or that soil reservoir up to that tile level, we're not actually moving that water out, right?
That's right. Very similar to the concepts of a septic system, except in a little bit reverse manner.
Yeah, wow. So we're improving soil health because that soil has more air in it. We're getting better roots. We're getting better yields, 30% higher yields often. So there's a whole lot of really positive things. So give me the nuts and bolts then Matt, please. You're putting this plastic tile in the field, but how far apart? How do we get the water away from the field once it's in that plastic tile? What's the nuts and bolts of tile drainage?
Yeah, so everybody understands the grid pattern idea. So most of the systems we install, like I said, are between the 2 to 3.5 foot depth. Also, the spacing can vary from 15 feet all the way to 40 foot spacing, sometimes even more. That's generally dependent upon the soil type as well as the budget, and also the type of crops grown in farming practice. When I say about the budget, what's interesting is that if you want to spread them farther apart to cover more area and then design the mains accordingly, then you can come back and split those systems very efficiently down the road.
Wait a minute. Okay. So splitting tile, I mean, you just described that well, the main size, but I just went through on my own farm and split my tile. But if my main wasn't big enough, you mean that wouldn't help me at all?
No, then you're going to end up overloading the mains that you have in place. Now, that can be resurrected by putting a new main on the backside and intercepting it in a few spots to help relieve it.
But what you're saying is that the main is really the control gate in terms of how much water comes off that field at any particular point in time. So cool, the main's the driver, but how much water then do we try to take away?
So the way we size our mains is based on three main factors. There's the grade, the acreage that's going into the main, as well as the drainage coefficient.
Okay, so what's drainage coefficient?
Drainage coefficient is the amount of rainwater that a parcel of land can take in 24 hours. So the most common for us as contractors is between 1/2 and 3/4 inch, sometimes into the 1 inch era. The reason that we designed to this is that for one, cost. The bigger the drainage coefficient, the more the cost of the system. But also you have to keep in mind your outlet, because if your outlet is not designed to take beyond 1 inch of drainage coefficient, then all you're doing is creating a problem at your outlet and adding to the problem of infrastructure downstream.
Yeah, so outlet's important, size of the main is important, and when you say a 1/2 inch drainage coefficient, that's a 1/2 inch of water in a 24-hour period?
That's correct.
Right, so a 1/2 inch of water in a 24-hour period, really, we shouldn't have a problem with the crops from that perspective. Cool. So you mentioned grade. I mean, gosh, with grade, we're doing some areas, Essex County, flat, flat, flat. So the grade can't be very much versus we get, I don't know, into Oxford County on those hills. How do we manage grade?
So this is where it's important to hire a licensed drainage contractor, because we are trained and also have the hours of experience to understand the topography of your land, because like you said, there's very different topography when you move across Ontario. Dealing with too flat a grade is an issue with both performance as well as sedimentation, but if you have too much grade, that can also create hydraulic pressure, and then you can end up with blowouts and performance issues on that end.
Yeah, I've experienced that, maybe not from too much grade, but from a problem. But that also points to the importance of the plow like this, a good drainage plow that can hold the grade, because man, water runs downhill, and if we don't hold the grade on that tile, we don't install it properly, we're going to have issues down the road, right?
That's right. If you have an amazing machine but an operator that doesn't know what they're doing, or you have an extremely amazing operator but a useless machine, then you might as well just leave the tile in the yard. Don't bother putting it in the ground.
Yeah, so it's best for me to stay out of the game entirely. I can quite see that. Yeah, absolutely. So Matt, really interesting stuff. It's really, though, a long-term investment, right? It costs a lot of money to get that tile in the ground. It's a long-term investment.
Absolutely. It's a generational investment. And this is where, again, hiring a licensed contractor is important, because the system, beyond the first couple years, there's going to be some growing pains. The soil has to recover. There's going to be tiles cut off. Once you get past that first year or two and those maintenance issues are accomplished, they're very low maintenance systems for a generation.
Yeah, but the first couple of years can be a bit of a pain in the neck. We split the tile on my farm, and I filled them all in, and 3 years later I had to go back and fill them all in again. It's just how it works, right?
Absolutely. Patience can be your best friend. Unfortunately, it's a very tough thing to teach.
Yeah, I don't have good patience. So really cool. It's a long-term investment, but the return on that investment is absolutely incredible. One of the clients that I work with, tiled field this year, 2023 wheat, tiled, 130 bushels per acre, right across the ditch, untiled, same farmer, same variety, everything, 80 bushels per acre. On a dry year, you'd think it wouldn't work, wouldn't help on a dry year, we actually see even more benefit, right?
Absolutely, and that's fairly common because early in the spring, when the ground is extremely wet, those roots do better, so then they go deeper. So therefore, when you get into the dry seasons, the roots are thriving better because they're able to reach deeper to find the moisture, which again, in a dry year, is why you often see the tile runs in the crops.
Yeah, interesting. They work best on a wet year and also on a dry year. It's only the perfect years where they're maybe not as much.
And also all crops, not just wheat.
No, wheat's the most important. Absolutely, wheat's but they do work on all crops. So cool stuff. Thank you so much, Matt. Really neat. The return on investment, you pay for tile whether you have it or not.
All right, thanks so much to Bern Tobin, to Peter Johnson and Matt Williams for joining us here on the show. That's Talking Tile, new video series. Go check it out on YouTube. Okay, we're going to jump now to my conversation with Mike Relf on the Ontario Predation Program and how that works. We'll be back with more right after this.
Dedication. Watching the sunset over your crop is one of life's simple pleasures. The anticipation of it all. We know that feeling. Introducing our new Airflex NXT, our best honeybee header yet with the closest cut ever. Light, fast reacting, and infinitely adjustable. More yield, less time and work. Airflex NXT focuses on the future. What drives your next? Visit honeybee.ca or contact your nearest honeybee dealer.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday, October 10th. Shout out to my brother. It's his birthday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Super U Premium Fertilizer. Want true nitrogen protection? Skip imitator products for an agronomically effective solution like Super U Premium Fertilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. Super U protects against all three forms of loss and is proven to boost yield potential. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. Joining me now on the line, I've got Mike Relf. He's the manager for beef, small ruminants, aquaculture, and alternative livestock for OMAFRA. Now, the reason I gave you a call, and thank you for doing this, I want to talk about Ontario's predation program. So just quickly, as an overview, for livestock producers in the province, what is this predation program? What does it offer?
So, the OWDCP, the Ontario Wildlife Damage Compensation Program, provides financial assistance to farmers whose livestock have been damaged by wildlife, or bee colonies, beehives, or beehive-related equipment has been damaged by wildlife. It's part of the the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership Program that was a 5-year, $3.5 billion federal, provincial, territorial funding program that was recently launched.
Now, when we talk about predators, and you're right, we're talking about livestock, including bees. Many people, of course, would think coyotes, but is there a range of predators that would be possibly some damages or death caused by different predators included in this program?
Absolutely. You mentioned coyotes. It is the predominant one across Ontario historically, but it also covers predation by wolves, bears, raccoons, foxes, weasels, minks, and fishers. And interestingly enough, second to coyotes, or close second and third, is ravens. Mm-hmm. We're seeing an increase in raven predation. But those are all the ones that are traditionally covered.
Yes, yeah. As a producer myself, we have certainly had raven kills, and I would agree. People are quite surprised sometimes to know that a raven would go after lambs or goats or those sorts of things. So certainly interesting. Now, the program has been around quite some time. Of course, it goes through iterations, and as you mentioned, this is sort of the latest version of it. What are some of the recent updates that the program has gone through?
So the most recent update that the program went through was a change in a requirement to submit a reasonable care plan. So under the program, along with all the eligibility requirements, there is the expectation that a producer has reasonable care in their production system, right? So usually what happens if there is a number of submissions that are put in, the threshold was 5. After 5 thresholds originally, there would be a requirement in the program for the producer to submit a reasonable care plan that we would review to ensure that and confirm that reasonable care was being taken and perhaps identify additional steps that might help reduce predation. This past couple of years, that was changed from 5 to 10. So now there's 10 applications for a particular producer before that figure gets put in place.
And certainly I can see why in that, as I understand it, let's say you lose one calf, that is one claim. And so if you lose 5 calves in one night, it would be one claim. And so I could see where you could reach that number 5 pretty quickly if, say, those 5 deaths happen over just a week. So I can sort of see where that comes in for sure. Now, what about timeline? So this is one of the things that I think, personally as a producer, I have noticed a huge difference in, a really great improvement in the turnaround time between making a claim, getting a judgment, and then actually being paid out if the judgment is in your favor. Has there been a big focus on getting those turnaround timelines down to what they are?
Yes, there has been. That was one of the recent changes as well in response to some of the suggested changes made by commodity groups was ability to move through the claim process in a quicker manner in order to be able to get money in the hands of producers. Now,
this is also key. And having done a few of these, what do producers need, or what should producers have on hand to make the process go smoothly? Because there are requirements, and then there are things that, of course, are just going to help out. But maybe let's start with what would help make the process go smoothly.
Well, so first of all, I would suggest, call as soon as you find evidence of predation, because in any instance, time is of the essence. We're at the mercy of weather that can degrade evidence or impact that. So call as soon as you find out the evidence of predation, and then preserve the site as best as possible to protect that evidence. Because what you need to do is put the phone call in to your municipality for livestock and poultry, or to the ministry if it's a bee predation event. But call to get the investigator out there, and they're going to want to see the site. So preserve the site. Take your own pictures as well. There's nothing that says that your pictures cannot be provided to the investigator. They're supposed to be out there within 72 hours. Sometimes that's quicker. There are a few times in April when that's not the case. So having your own pictures goes a long way to ensuring that you've got all the documentation ready for when that investigator does come out. Make sure you've got the proper eligibility requirements, right? So you mentioned in our earlier conversation quickly things like an FBRN number, a premise ID, a CRA business number, a social insurance number. If you're a beekeeper, we need to know your ID registered number under the Bees Act. And all of these things are up and available on our website, ontario.ca/predation. But those are some of the key things to make things go smoothly, to make sure that you've got that. And then the last piece of advice I would give is, this is your application that the investigators are filling out. So make sure you review the application. Ensure it's completed to its best ability, that you're comfortable with all the information that's there, and it's complete as possible.
That's a very good point. Doing that review, and because there is, it's not a huge document, but certainly there's ample opportunity to describe different things about the scene or what you noticed or those sorts of things. So certainly there's lots of room to make a lot of points in there. One thing I did want to just quickly touch base on was the 72-hour mark. So as you said, an investigator has, or evaluator has 72 hours to come to do their evaluation. Depending on the weather and depending on perhaps, extra visits in those 3 days by coyotes or something like that, there might not be a lot left. So in those situations, is this where you really rely on the photos farmers themselves took?
Exactly. And to help with that along, I would encourage any livestock producer to, in times when you're not dealing with predation, to investigate and figure out who your investigator is or who the municipal contact is, so that you know who that is, right? And you can call them right away and say, look, right, the weather's going to be rain tomorrow, we're going to lose all that stuff. Have the conversation with them and say, I'm going to take pictures and have that dialogue so that you know what the plan is, and you can preserve or at least document that evidence to support when they are able to come out or when the weather does cause challenges with that investigative, that you've got the background to support your claim.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a great point. Certainly get to know them, figure out who they are, and those sorts of things. Also, keep that number handy. So the number is different. So who do you call if predation happens? Is it your municipality that you call? How does that work?
Yeah. So if it's if you're in an organized municipality, then it's your municipality that calls. There are some unorganized territories in Northern Ontario where you would call our contact center, the Agriculture Information Contact Center, and the ministry staff will do that. And it's the ministry that you would call in the case of predation events for bees. So that is our Agriculture Information Contact Center is 1-877-424-1300. And that would be the number you would call.
Things are a little different in the north. It's a big place, Mike. It's a very big place.
It is a very big place.
You can drive for 11 hours and still be in Ontario's.
More than that, yes.
Yes, yeah.
I'm amazed how many people don't really get the opportunity to understand the breadth of
Ontario.
Ontario. Yeah, when you go from Windsor to Rainy River, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I agree, more people should do it. All right, okay. Mike, thank you so much for this. Super helpful. This is, of course, the time of year. And as you said, coyote is maybe the most common. This is a busy time of year for coyotes or training pups, and definitely can cause major issues for our livestock producers. So I do thank you for taking the time and joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Lyndsey. All the best.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
At Brett Young, we focus on what's real. It's how we became Canada's largest independent seed company. That's why we're asking a real farmer, what do you think of BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid?
What's that?
BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid with Pod Defender shatter reduction technology and Defender-rated club root and blackleg resistance.
Good yield, yeah. Probably choose it again.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to your Brett Young retailer today to see for yourself. Brett Young, distinct by design.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday, October 10th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. It is Tuesdays with Lyndsey, and we're wrapping it up here on the show. So as promised, there's a few things I just wanted to wrap up in this last segment. So many moving parts, things going on, so just wanted to work in some feedback from the audience and some of the questions and things that have come out of last week's issues panel. So one of the questions we asked was on farmland values. So if you caught JP Gervais' discussion last week, and of course our discussion on the issues panel, we talked about that so far in the first half of 2023, farmland values averaged up 7.7%, and we asked the question on our poll at RealAgriculture.com. We asked, what do you think will happen with land values for the last half of 2023? So do you think they will increase at the same rate, that 7.7 roughly, increase at a higher rate, or actually potentially increase at a much lower rate or even decrease? And so far, the the majority of people feel that either we're at sort of a push, as Sean would call it, staying where we're at, or we're going to see a further pullback. And this first half of 2023 certainly was a pullback from what the averages have been before. And so far with the poll, only 5% of people answering are saying that they think we're going to see more growth in land values above that 7.7%. Most everyone else feels it will be the same or less, and more people feel it will be at a slower rate. And that, of course, makes sense when you think about perhaps tighter financials, more expensive borrowing, those sorts of things. But it's great to get some feedback. Certainly had some wonderful conversations with people who, depending on where you're at with your farm, if you were planning to buy land, knowing what it was going to cost, it's still potentially the right time to buy. And no one can really make that decision for you. But for some people, let's back up a second. Probably for every farm, the idea of having more land or having access to more land opens up opportunity. And it's often a huge part of a growth plan, especially if you've got another generation you're trying to bring on board. Part of the growth plan usually involves taking on more land, finding more land, another farm here, there, and maybe with residents, maybe without. And you're trying to grow that farm to get it to the point where you can bring on another family or something like that. And so most would take it on. But realistically, especially with more expensive money, you still need to be in that financial position to do so. And that is the sticky part for some who are perhaps just not at that stage where financially they can really swing it when interest rates are where they're at. So a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to think about. And certainly it doesn't look like, at least for the next calendar year, that interest rates are going anywhere quickly. But perhaps we will see a steadying, and then we'll have to see the impact of higher interest rates over a longer term. So interesting there for sure. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to make sure we had a discussion about, and we talked about it briefly last week, and I was going to grab a clip for today's show, but I've managed to use up all of my airtime. But Sean had a really cool conversation that's on RealAgriculture.com. It's also on our YouTube channel if you want to head over there and subscribe, with Dr. Evan Fraser of the University of Guelph and Mohammed Yaghi of the RBC Climate Institute. So it's an interesting conversation because the report finds that Canada is lagging on investing in creating what it calls climate smart agriculture. And one of my concerns I think I have with this is that many in agriculture are at times really at odds with, the term sustainable or regenerative or climate smart or all those sorts of things. And we tend to, I think, at times throw the baby out with the bathwater, in that we sort of hear these terms and close our ears and don't necessarily want to dig into more. And this is one of those times that I really hope that doesn't happen, just because, this report perhaps, it's in line with the other reports that RBC has been doing, and there's some really good stuff in here. Whether or not you agree with where the report sees things going or how they'd like to see things happen, there's still an incredible amount of statistics and discussions and facts that are carried into these reports that really do paint an interesting picture of agriculture, far beyond anything to do with carbon or climate, etc. Sure, a lot of that is in there, but there's some really excellent discussions on, our competitiveness, really, and our infrastructure and investing in people and those sorts of things. So I highly recommend, maybe if the title of the report or the topic isn't necessarily your jam, don't let that sort of get in the way of listening to this conversation, because it is really interesting, and I highly recommend checking out the report realistically, because it's really important that we discuss these things and we figure out what path forward do we take? Where should we be investing dollars? Where should we be supporting farmers? What kind of business risk management programs do we need? What kind of incentive programs do we need? And if we don't have a solid handle on sort of what's been discussed or what's been assessed or what's been thrown out there, it's hard to come from a place of knowledge to have that conversation. And I think about this is one of the things I wanted to wrap up, is I think about this from the point of here we are into middle October. This begins, as I think one of the farmers of Western Canada called it, pointy shoe season, meaning it's time to get on, the suit jacket and head to Ottawa with your farm groups and go and meet with, MPs and ministers and all sorts of wonderful people that have a hand in shaping policy for Canada, for Canada's agriculture industry. And realistically, these are such important conversations. These meetings happen all over the winter. And I'm lucky enough because, of course, I'm based near Ottawa. And sometimes it means I get to see some of my Western people when they're here in town. And I really appreciate that. But there's so many people who are doing good work on behalf of farmers, lobbying here in Ottawa for change and trying to find common ground with MPs and policymakers and trying to shape what we want agriculture to be going forward. So I'll leave it there, but I just love the term pointy shoe season. It's so good. Okay. If you've got feedback on today's show, you can, of course, call that RealAg feedback line, 1-855-776-6147. You can give us a follow across all social media platforms at RealAgriculture, or subscribe to our YouTube. Check out all our videos there. And I'll be back for the Issues panel on Friday. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Economics. With one-of-a-kind tools, research, and content, Economics is farming's go-to information resource. Find it all on nutrient-economics.com or download the app.